Chapter 1. What, Where, How, and When. Rashida's question. Rashida sat reading the newspaper. Suddenly, her eyes fell on a small headline. 100 years ago. How? She wondered. Could anyone know what had happened so many years ago? Finding out what happened yesterday. You could listen to the radio, watch television, read a newspaper. Last year, ask somebody who remembers. But what about long ago? Let us see how it can be done. What can we know about the past? There are several things we can find out. What people ate, the kind of clothes they wore, the houses in which they lived. We can find out about the lives of the hunters, herders, farmers, rulers, merchants, priests, craft persons, artists, musicians, and scientists. We can also find out about the games children played, the stories they heard, the plays they saw, the song they sang. Where did people live? Find the river Narmada on the map 1, page 2. People have lived along the banks of this river for several hundred thousand years. Some of the earliest people who lived here were skilled gatherers, that is, people who gathered their food. They knew about the vast wealth of plants in the surrounding forest and collected roots, fruits, and other forest produce of their food. They also hunted animals. Now find Suleiman and Kirthar Hills to the northwest, some of the areas where women and men first began to grow crops such as wheat and barley. About 8,000 years ago are located here. People also began rearing animals like sheep, goat, and cattle and lived in the village. Locate the Garo Hills in the northeast and Vindhyas in the central India. These were some of the areas where agriculture developed. The places where rice was first grown are to the north of Vindhyas. Trace the river Indus and its tributaries. Tributaries are small rivers that flow into the larger river. About 4,700 years ago, some of the earliest cities flourished on the bank of these rivers. Later, about 2,500 years ago, cities developed on the bank of the Ganga and its tributaries and along the sea coast. Locate the Ganga and its tributary called the Son. In ancient times, the area along these rivers to the south of the Ganga was known as Magda River. Now lying in the state of Bihar, its rulers were very powerful and set up a large kingdom. Kingdoms were set up in other parts of the country as well. Throughout, people traveled from one part of the subcontinent to other. The hills and the high mountains, including Himalayas, deserts, rivers, and sea, made journey dangerous at times, but never impossible. So, men and women moved in search of livelihood, as also to escape from the natural disaster like flood and drought. Sometimes men marched in armies, conquering others' land. Besides, merchants traveled with caravans, or the ship carrying valuable goods from place to place, and religious teachers walked from village to village, town to town, stopping to offer instruction and advice on the way. Finally, some people perhaps traveled driven by the spirit of adventure, wanting to discover new and exciting places. All these led to the sharing of idea between the people. Why do people travel nowadays? Look at the map once more. Hills, mountains, and sea from the natural frontiers of the subcontinent. While it was difficult to cross these frontiers, those who wanted could and did scale the mountain and cross the sea. People from across the frontiers also came into the subcontinent and settled here. These movements of the people enriched our culture traditions. People have shared new ways of carving stones, composing music, and even cooking food over several hundred of years. Name of the land. Two of the words we often use for a country are India and Bharat. The word India comes from Indus, called Sindhu in Sanskrit. Find Iran and Greece in your atlas. The Iranians and the Greek who came through the northwest about 2500 years ago and were familiar with the Indus, called as the Hindu or Indus, and the land to the east of the river was called India. The name Bharat was used for a group of people who lived in northwest and who are mentioned in Rig Veda. The earliest composition in Sanskrit dated to about 3500 years ago. Later it was used for the country. Finding about the past. There are several ways of finding out about the past. One is to search for and read the books that were written long ago. These are called as manuscript because they were written by hand. This comes from the Latin word manu, meaning hand. These were usually written on the palm leaves or on a specially prepared bark of a tree known as the birch, which grows in Himalayas. Over the years, many manuscripts were written away by insects. Over the years, many manuscripts were eaten away by insects. Some of were destroyed, but many have survived, often preserved in temples and monasteries. These books dealt with all kinds of subjects, religious belief and practices, the lives of kings, medicines, and science. Besides, there were epics, poems, plays. Many of these were written in Sanskrit, others were in Prakrit, language used by ordinary people, and Tamil. We can also study inscriptions. These are writings on relatively hard surface such as stones or metals. Sometimes kings got their orders inscribed so that people could see, read and obey them. There are other kinds of inscriptions as well, where the men and the women, including kings and queens, recorded what they did. For example, the king often kept records of the victories in the battle. Can you think of the advantages of the writing on a hard surface and what could have been the difficulties? There were many other things that were made and used in the past, and those who study these objects are called as archaeologists. They study the remains of the buildings made of stones and bricks, paintings and sculptures. They also explore and excavate, dig under the surface of the earth to find tools, weapons, pots, pans, ornaments, and coins. Some of these objects may be made of stones, other of bones, baked clay, or metal. Objects that are made of hard and imperishable substance usually survive for long. Archaeologists also look for bones of animals, birds, and fish to find out what people ate in the past. Plant remains survive far more rarely. If seeds of the grain or pieces of the wood have been burnt, they survive in charred form. Do you think the cloth is found frequently by archaeologists? Historians, that is, scholars who study the past, often use the word source to refer to the information found from manuscript, inscriptions, and archaeology. Once sources are found, learning about the past becomes an adventure as we reconstruct it bit by bit. So historians and archaeologists are like detectives who use all these sources like clue to find out about the past. One past or many. Did you notice the title of this book, Our Past? We have used the word past in plural to draw attention to the fact that the past was different for different group of peoples. For example, the lives of the herders or the farmers were different from those of the kings and the queens. The lives of the merchants were different from those of the craft person, and so on. Also, as it is true even today, people follow different practices and customs in different parts of the country. For example, Today, most of the people living in the Andaman Island get their food by fishing, hunting, and collecting forest produce. By contrast, most people living in the cities depend on other for the supplies of food, different such as these existed in the past as well. Besides, there is another kind of difference. We know a great deal about the kings and the battles. They fought because they kept records of their victories. Generally, ordinary people such as hunters, fishing flocks, gatherers, farmers, and herders do not keep the record of what they did, while archaeology helps us to find out about their lives. There is much that remain unknown. What do date means? If somebody asks you the date, you will probably mention the day, month, or the year. 2000 and something. These years are counted from the date generally assigned to the birth of the Jesus Christ, the founder of Christianity. So, 2000 means 2000 years after the birth of Christ. All days before the birth of Christ are counted backward and usually have the letter BC before the Christ added on, and in this book we will refer to the date going back from the present using 2000 as our starting point. Letters and the dates. BC, we have seen stands for before Christ. You will sometimes find 80 dates before dates. This stands for the two Latin word Anno Domini, meaning in the year of the Lord, that is the Christ. So 2012 can also be written as AD 2012. Sometimes C is used instead of AD and BCE instead of BC. The letter C stands for the Common Era and BCE stands for Before Common Era. We use these terms because the Christian era is now used in most of the countries of the world. In India, we began using this form of dating from about 200 years ago, and sometimes the letter BP meaning before present are used. Find the two dates mentioned in the page 3 and which set of letters would you use for them. Thank you so much.